Hello internet, welcome back to more Frontline 2 Exilium, and we finally have the global release. I've been playing the game non-stop, and you know what? I thought I should make a video on the current limited banner that we see. It'll be Suomi and Ullrid. Who should you be pulling for? Stay tuned as we break it down. And yeah, let's just jump right in. The first contender for your pulls will be Suomi. Now, what is she all about? Her role here is a shielder or healer and support. Now, before we even dive in, these are like a whole summary of their kit. If you want to read every single wording, because some of it are convoluted a little bit, you gotta read it again. And do pause on the video if you want to take a read, but most of the time though, I'll be showing you the footage as I read to you what they do. With that out the way, let's just start with covering her passive. Her passive has a minor AoE healing at the end of her action. She gains 2 confectants at the end of her action. She deals 1 fixed stability damage if shielded allies are attacked and the shield doesn't break. If allies uses basic or skill, applies avalanche to a random enemy. 5 stacks of avalanche on 1 enemy will deal 8 stability damage instantly. Suomi performs action support if allies attack an enemy in her range. This action support attack will deal 3 stability damage. She also buffs crit damage on her allies up to 2 times per turn. And that is only her passive. That for me does a lot of things for any character. So this is pretty busted looking. And I'll just straight up give you a TLDR. I think you just straight up want to get a Suomi for any account. Like, straight up. But hey, stay tuned in the end as we make a comparison, right? Moving on, we do have her ultimate though, which costs 5 confectants. Confectants being ultimate points or skill points, however way you want to think of it. You can gain confectants through different ways. In the case of Suomi though, as I mentioned before, she has the passive that gets her 2 confectants every end of action. That does mean you can use this ulti every 3 turns, because in 3 turns you gain 6 confectants. This ultimate ability on Suomi has an AoE range. It deals fixed damage equal to 50% of the defense to all enemies in range. It restores 50% of Suomi's max HP, 6 stability points. It cleanses 3 debuffs, cleanses taunt, fear, infatuated, and stun. All of that I just mentioned is for all allies, so not just herself. This is incredibly busted. She also grants Frost Barrier, which is a shield that inflicts frigid if broken by an enemy. Frigid is a debuff where it completely stops an enemy from taking their next turn. So if they don't break it, you're chill. If they break it, they lose a turn next turn. It is just busted as heck. She also grants defense up to Wind Street Bastion, which is basically damage reduction on allies for 3 turns. Notice that it's for 3 turns. That means you have infinite uptime on this Frost Barrier, because you also take 3 turns to use your ulti as you gain 6 confectants points. Moving along though, if an ally is full HP before she's being healed, gain 1 additional stack of shelter, which reduces stability damage taken. You also gain continuous healing 1 for 3 turns. I know it sounds confusing. I thought so too when I tried to understand what she does. It's just so many things, but trust me, it will make sense as you get used to her. But for now though, let's just keep on going. And yep, I needed 2 pages for her ultimate. It hasn't ended yet. This ultimate also generates frost tiles in a 4 tile radius for 3 turns. Frost tiles here applies frozen to enemies, which ends their movement in these tiles. They also gain a weakness to freeze damage if they're in these tiles as well. Do you note that frozen is not frigid? Frozen doesn't just make them lose the turn, yeah? Moving on, we have our skill 2 Snow's Grace here, which costs 1 confectant. You gain 6 for 3 turns. You still have 1 extra even after using your ultimate, right? So this skill selects 1 ally except for herself and gain them Frost Barrier, which is the shield that deals frigid if broken. You also gain 2 stability points for the target. For each enemy within 5 tiles of selected target, apply 1 stack of defensive support, which is 30% of a player's base defense buff. You get 2 stacks of the same thing if there are larger enemies within 5 tiles. It sounds really complicated, but just think about as long as you're together and if there are enemies around you, you're gonna take less damage as you would otherwise. And that is all for this skill. The next skill 2, we have Winter's Wrath, which has a cooldown of 1, but you don't have to spend confectants for it. You deal freeze damage to 1 selected enemy, but you cannot crit. Additionally though, you deal fixed damage equals to 50% of Suomi's defense. Do note that fixed damage means that you don't care if the enemy is taking cover. You will always do the same amount of damage, but then again, you cannot crit, so the damage is not that crazy anyway. However, not bad for a support character. You also deal 4 stability damage at base, and for each ally within 6 tiles, you increase stability damage dealt by 1 point. In Frontline 2, you can get up to 5 characters in certain modes for your team, so you can get 4 allies around you. That means you can get 4 extra stability point damage to a grand total of 8 with this skill. It is insane. And moving on with the skill 1, which does 3 stability damage, and it's a single target damage. And with that, you pretty much know her entire role. She's a healer support with shields, she has buffs and CC debuffs, she has cleanses, and she can still do a bunch of stability point damage to boost your team's DPS. And here with a list of pros and cons, she has insanely strong buffs and debuffs, consistent shields to make your team feel safer, massive stability damage as I mentioned, stability restoration for your allies so you die less, enemy CC through breaking her shield with the frigid. It's just, what more can you ask for, right? As for her cons though, if there are any at all, she requires to stay close to as many allies as possible, which in some stages, I believe in story, you are forced to be split up a little bit. But then again, it's not like she cannot be used under those circumstances. It's just a bit less ideal. She also lacks cleansing outside of the ultimate, so if the enemy is constantly having waves of debuffs on you, she might need some help from someone else in terms of cleansing debuff because she only does that on her ultimate. And with that said, should you be pulling Suomi, long story short, must pull for Freeze team especially, with Loda, which is a free character that you can get right now, and Macchiato, which may be coming. Macchiato should be a pretty popular character considering she is a goddamn wife, but even without thinking about freeze teams and such, she still has very high value for any accounts because of how she survives. It's gonna help your entire team just tank more, CCing the enemy that allows you to get out of tough situations, making them losing their turn and for you to run away for a little bit. So yeah, a jack of all trades for the survival slash support slot for me. I think anyone would be glad to have a Suomi. And with that said, let's just move on to Ullrid now. And similarly, we'll go through their roles and what they do, and then at the end we'll compare the two. The role of Ullrid is a multi-action DPS with high mobility. Quite a long title, but that's exactly what it is though. To take a look at the skill summary, her passive has 2-turn cooldown, which is kind of unique to have a cooldown in your passive, but not all of it has a cooldown though. The first thing that it does is that at the start of the battle, she gains 1 stack of Hunter's Talent, which is Ullrid's exclusive mark. You don't gotta know what it is yet, it doesn't really do much now. On top of that, you gain 1 Confectance, and both of which for each ally. So let me rephrase this again. At the start of the battle, you gain 1 stack of Hunter's Talent and 1 Confectance for each ally except for yourself on the field. So if you have 3 allies, you gain 3 Hunter's Talent and 3 Confectance. I believe that's what it means. And moving on, this passive says that you gain 1 stack of Hunter's Talent and 1 Confectance after each active attacks. This means that for every attack she does, she's gonna get 1 talent back and 1 Confectance back. You're gonna cycle it very well, but she does spend a lot of Confectance, as you'll see later. More in this passive though, she gains 20% attack buff if she moves 2 tiles or more. If her HP is below 50%, she gains 1 stack of Camouflage for 1 turn, and this effect has a cooldown of 2 turns. Camouflage is basically an effect where you cannot be targeted if other allies are on the field still, unless you're hit by a stray shot through an AoE that targeted your ally. And that is all for the passive. Moving on, let's take a look at the ultimate, which has a cooldown of 3 turns. This ultimate has 2 stability damage, and it attacks enemy with the highest HP within the range. For every 2% of enemies missing HP, increases attack by 1% for this skill. If this kills the target, increases damage of the next active attack by 30%. This ultimate right here will consume all Hunter's Talent, which is the mark I said. It does nothing yet just then. Each stack of Hunter's Talent consumed here will increase damage of this attack by 10% up to 60%. If there are 2 or more stacks of Hunter's Talent, gain 1 stack of Camouflage for 1 turn. And with that said, it paints a clear picture of what Ullrid does. During the ultimate's cooldown, you want to obtain Confectance, you want to obtain Hunter's Talent, and then when the ultimate is available, you want to just consume all of it and dunk the highest amount of damage possible to your enemies. And that'll be all for the ultimate. Moving on, we have the skill 2, which is Blade Whirlwind, which costs a Confectance point of 3. That is a lot. This is one of her main mechanics that dons her the term multi-action DPS. It does 1 stability damage, and you select an enemy and attack. You gain Whirlwind as well. Whirlwind is an effect where you can get 6 tiles of extra movement after you attack, and while you do this extra movement, you can use the same skill again. So there you have an infinite loop actually. You can use it again and again and again if you have enough Confectance points, which you can only get a maximum of 6, but you can regain it back through your passive. You'll be able to reach 9 total Confectance points spent if you have a weapon for her that allows you to gain Confectance, and you gain Confectance through her passive. If you attack the same target in the same action, increases damage dealt by 30%. This is a skill where you get to farm some damage, your Hunter's Talent for your ulti, and of course your Confectance as well through your passive, right? And moving forward, let's take a look at the next skill 2. We have Hunter's Sight, which is a cooldown of 1. It means you don't have to spend Confectance. It does 1 stability damage where you select an enemy and attack. gains 6 tiles of additional movement as well. This time though, you can't use it again, so it's more so just for you to reposition. If the enemy is not killed though, apply Mark of Prey. Mark of Prey says that at the end of the action, if the enemy is in the 5 tile radius of Ullrid, she will deal AoE damage. If the enemy is not killed as well, you apply movement down 2 for 2 turns. When she's attacked by a target with Mark of Prey, reduces damage taken by 20%. And that will be for a skill 2 Hunter's Sight. And here with the skill 1, it does 2 stability damage, and it says select 1 enemy and attack. Is a mistake. She actually does an AoE damage. So she actually has some ways to deal with AoE scenarios, although it's not going to be her bread and butter. And with that said, we can conclude on Ullrid for a little bit. You can expect Ullrid to be a mainly single target damage dealer that takes a bunch of actions. For each action that she can take through her skill that you use 3 times in a row, you can trigger more action supports, like say through Xiangjiu. That means if you pair her with characters that can do these action supports mechanic, you can do a bunch of damage every time you do her extra movement skill, right? So in the end here, we have a pretty strong damage dealer and a pretty strong sustain. Which one should you go for? For me, it's a really easy still Suomi. In the end, if you cannot survive, especially the tougher endgames where enemy starts to one-shot you, with Suomi's unique shielding abilities though, you can avoid that. And the stupidly busted CC abilities as well to just stop the enemy from taking the next turn. If you want to progress smoothly, investing on at least one good sustain that you know does never like let you down, it's just gonna set you up for life, right? That's why I really do suggest getting yourself one Suomi right now. And yep, that will be all for today. It is 1 AM and I'm going to perish. I can finally play the game, man. But yeah, I will see you next time. Subscribe for more GFL. I would appreciate that. And take care.